Hello to my friends, my buttercups. Welcome to another exciting episode of Topic Discuss. Just a quick reminder for our members. We have, if you want to join Topic Discuss, you can click on the join button next to the subscribe button, and you can join as a Butters at Tier 1 level, a Cups at Tier 2 level, and a full Buttercup at Tier 3 level. And on today's episode, I'm really excited to have the opportunity to speak with a TikToker that I happen to enjoy watching. And I'll just give you a little bit of background before I introduce him. I was listening to one of his TikToks, and he was discussing his background as a Jehovah's Witness. And I believe he is an ex-Jehovah's Witness, but I'll let him talk about that. But he mentioned some things about Mormons, and what he talked about reminded me of when I was a Mormon missionary myself in Virginia many years ago. And I can remember distinctly talking with my missionary companion, and those who understand Mormon missionary work, you're paired up 2 by 2, and so you have this companion you don't really know. We had just finished knocking on the door of a Jehovah's Witness, and on our way walking home, my companion just said, "Man, I'm so glad I'm so glad we don't believe stupid things like the Jehovah's Witnesses do. I'm so glad I'm not a Jehovah's Witness, and that we have the right or the truth, the right doctrine or the truth." And I remember how much that turned me off with my companion. I actually called him out on it, and I said, they probably think the same thing about us, you know. So we're going to find out from Martin today. So welcome to Topic Discuss. Buckle up, Buttercups. Let me introduce our guest. Hello.
Hey, Gary.
Riley.
Hey. Yes.
Is it Riley or Martin? Riley.
It's both. Riley is my last name, but that's what everyone calls me.
Okay. So everybody calls you Riley?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So can you hear me okay and see me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. Yeah.
I'm just going to switch sides here with you, if that's okay.
Cool.
Just
No
to
problem.
kind of. So welcome to Topic Discuss.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
And I want you to know I am a fan of your TikTok. You're very good at managing TikTok. I'm not so good at that. I usually use YouTube, but I think you do a great job.
Thank you.
How long have you been doing TikTok?
About a month now, so not very long.
And what made you decide to start making TikToks and talking on TikTok?
To be honest, I can't really remember. I know that there's a quite a large XJW community on TikTok. I've been aware of that for a while. I guess I just wanted to see what it was like, and the kind of content that was being shared there. So I just thought I'd join in.
And so you are an ex-Jehovah's Witness?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. I was a Jehovah's Witness for 42 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to dive into your story if you don't mind.
Sure.
I know the audience will want to know where you're from, where you're living now, and so you grew up Jehovah's Witness, I assume.
That's right. Yeah.
The stage is yours. Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you. So I refer to myself as being born into the religion, but I was technically not born in. My mother started studying with the Jehovah's Witnesses when I was about 2 years old, and she studied with them for 4 years, and she got baptized when I was around 6 years old. So even though I wasn't technically born into the religion, it's all I knew. So I was raised that way. I don't really remember anything before that. So I was a Jehovah's Witness throughout my entire childhood, which was challenging at times, but I didn't really have a lot of the negative experiences that a lot of other XJWs have had. My childhood, in terms of where the religion, played into my childhood, wasn't really bad. My problem started when I hit my teenage years and on into adulthood. That's when I found the religion and the lifestyle a bit more challenging. But I stayed in it. I'm one of 3 siblings who were raised Jehovah's Witness, and I'm the only one who stayed with it.
Wow. Including your mom?
Yeah, my mum is still an active Jehovah's Witness. My dad was a Jehovah's Witness, but he stopped a few years before he died. Yeah, so for a very long time, it was just me and my mother. We were the only Jehovah's Witnesses in the family.
So when did you leave the Jehovah's Witnesses?
April 2019. So not very long ago.
Fairly recently.
Fairly recently,
and
yeah.
How did your mom, or how has your mom responded to that?
Not very well. She doesn't really speak to me. So the Jehovah's Witnesses have a very strict shunning policy for anyone for former members. So whether you disassociate from the organization or if you're disfellowshipped, which is like being excommunicated, in both situations, you're shunned. So no active Jehovah's Witness is permitted to speak to you, and that extends even to close family members. So my mum and I haven't really spoken in 2 years. Well, in more than 2 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How does that feel to you?
It's very, very difficult. It's getting easier. It's not quite getting easier, but I'm getting used to it. But it is very difficult. It's extremely difficult.
Because that kind of culture or policy would really motivate you not to ever leave, right? Because it means leaving your family. Yeah,
exactly. And I know many people who no longer believe in the doctrine, but they stay in it purely for that reason, because they know that they will lose their entire support system, all of their friends, family, especially for people who were raised in the religion, because they're so isolated. I mean, you're not supposed to have friends outside of the religion. For somebody who's born into it, all of their friends are in the religion. They don't really have anyone outside. So that is a real big motivation to stay in, even if you no longer believe. And I know many people who are in that situation.
Yeah, I think, and part of what I wanted to do today in our discussion is kind of compare and contrast Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormonism. I grew up Mormon as well. And been in the church up to now 47 years.
Wow.
But I can say that, and I have a long family history, right? On my mom's side of the family, there were original founders of the church, so it's kind of deeply embedded in my culture. But I think what's interesting is in Mormonism, two of my siblings have that left completely, but in Mormonism there's not a shunning policy, so it didn't impact their relationship with me, my other sister, or my parents, or any extended family. But there certainly is an undercurrent of shame or sadness, like from my parents or whatever. But it would not I think it depends on your family, but it's not the church saying you have to disassociate at all. And in the Mormon church, if someone decides that they're going to leave, sometimes it might just be that they stop going. They just stop attending. And they might be asked by their church, their congregation leaders, why aren't you coming, or what can we do to make it easier for you to come back? But so there's kind of these two scenarios. You just kind of stop going, or you do keep going even though you've had a faith crisis and you don't believe any of the doctrine anymore, but it's just easier because you have your social network, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, similar thing exists with Jehovah's Witnesses. It's colloquially referred to as fading. So that's when somebody just stops going. They don't formally disassociate and they're not kicked out, but they just stop going. But often in those situations, they'll get soft shunned. So members of the congregation would start viewing them as being a bad association, and they would start shunning them preemptively. I mean, they may still say hello to them if they saw them on the street, but they wouldn't voluntarily contact them or go out of their way to be in their company.
So when you, in your case then in 2019, and I'm always curious about anyone in a religion that's kind of going through this, what did you decide to do in 2019? Like formally disassociate or fade? And what drove you to the decision?
Right. Well, it wasn't really my decision, to be honest. I was kicked out. So I was what we call disfellowshipped. So when a member is deemed to have committed a serious sin that the elders don't feel they're sufficiently repentant for, in a case like that, they will be disfellowshipped, and that's what happened to me. But I was still a believing member at that time when that happened, although I did find I was extremely disillusioned. I'd been disillusioned for a really long time, but I still believed it was the truth. I still believed it was the one true religion. But after I got disfellowshipped, I just found it too hard to keep up with the demands of the religion and the lifestyle. So I decided to not seek reinstatement.
So I want to make sure you feel really comfortable. So, we're live, so I don't want to, so if there's questions you don't want to answer, you can just say, not going to answer that.
Sure.
But I know the audience would be curious why you were disfellowshipped, and maybe you could start, if you're comfortable sharing why, then feel free to, but maybe start with what are some of the reasons in the Jehovah's Witness congregation for getting disfellowshipped? Sure.
Many different reasons, but the most common ones are some kind of sexual sin, like fornication or adultery. Those are the two most common reasons for someone to be disfellowshipped. Neither of those apply to me. I was disfellowshipped for something else, which I'm not comfortable sharing at the moment. But it wasn't either of those two things. Although I was suspected of committing adultery, and I was accused of committing adultery, which wasn't true. But I do feel that the decision that they took to disfellowship me, I feel that there was an element of, if we can't get him for this thing that we suspect him of, then we'll just throw the book at him for the other stuff. So
you think they were wanting you out, or?
Yeah, I think they believed that I was adulterous. There was no proof of it, but I think, I mean, I can't be 100% sure, but I do suspect that because they felt strongly that I did commit adultery, they threw the book at me for the things that I actually did. Rather than, because they couldn't get me on the adultery, they just threw the book at me for everything else.
So that's interesting. So when you say adultery, then just so we have common terms, so I assume that you are married.
I'm divorced at the moment. I was married at the time, yeah.
And at the time you were married, and because I'm just thinking, like in the Mormon church, and this has evolved over time, right? So if you went back 30 years, there would be a much stricter environment for what causes a disciplinary council and excommunication. In our church, we say excommunication severs you from the church.
Right.
But we do have this disfellowship level that doesn't kick you out of the church, but it precludes you from participating while you repent.
Yeah, we have something similar. It's called public reproof. So so an announcement will be made that such and such a person has been publicly reproved. So the congregation will then know that you've committed a sin, but you're deemed to have been repentant. You're under certain restrictions, so you can't participate in meetings to the same extent, but you're still a member of the congregation.
And so, so when I think about your case where there was this accusation of adultery, was that coming from church leaders? They just kind of were do they look for people to, are they kind of on a witch hunt toward people, or did your spouse, your companion,
Yeah,
falsely accuse you?
my spouse falsely accused me of adultery.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, but
And
the
so that
elders
put,
believed her. I'm certain they believed her 100%.
yeah. Well, and then just one other kind of technical detail. Recently, under the current leader of the Mormon Church, Russell M. Nelson, there's no longer it's a little softer now, even more so. There's not disciplinary councils anymore. They're called membership councils. They're not as heavy-handed, and I don't think that we even call it excommunication anymore. However, you can still be removed from the church. And I think in our church, one of the biggest things that I'm noticing right now is that what causes the I don't know if it's not called excommunication anymore. It's something else. But basically, your records are removed. You're kicked out. Is mostly for something we call apostasy. Right. And apostasy is that you are speaking out against the church, against the church leaders, and potentially bringing people with you to leave the church.
Yeah.
Is there something similar to that with Jehovah's Witnesses?
It's not just similar, it's exactly the same.
Okay.
You could, you could be disfellowshipped for apostasy, and it's exactly the same reasons, causing divisions, speaking out against the organization. And they have this idea that people who do that are trying to draw others away to follow them out of the organization. Yeah, so it's pretty much exactly the same.
And in Mormonism, so I did an episode a few weeks back on a Pew Research study just on religions in general, but Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses were called out specifically in the study, along with white evangelical Christians and white Catholics. And a couple of things were interesting about that data, but a common theme is just a rapid declining religion. It's like people are leaving every religion, especially the Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, white evangelicals, white Catholics, and so you see a lot of ex-Mormon Reddits, ex-Mormon YouTube videos, a lot of ex-Mormon TikTok. I've seen the same thing with ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. So two questions. Are you seeing the same thing just anecdotally in your circle? And do you think the Jehovah's Witness organization understands or recognizes that there's kind of this major declining of their membership?
Absolutely. Firstly, your first question, yes, most definitely. People are leaving the organization in droves. And it seems to be accelerating all the time. So every September, the organization publishes the service report for the previous 12 months, numbers broken down by countries and regions, and how many people have come in and how many people have gone out. And the last year's service report showed the very first decline in overall numbers worldwide in 40 years. And wow. And I suspect that trend will continue. Of course, it's just speculation on my part, but I don't think that the organization is going to see another increase ever over the previous year. I think it's going to be a steady decline from now on every single year.
It's just birth rates, really, right?
Exactly. I mean, nobody is coming into the religion from the evangelizing work that the witnesses do. It hasn't been the case for years. Any increase that they have had in previous years has just come from indoctrinating children being born into the religion and getting baptized when they reach a certain age, which is a very, very young age typically. That's the only increase that they're getting. So
in Mormonism, it's very similar, except there is this anomaly that in some North African countries, the Mormon Church is growing quite quickly. But when I go back to the Pew Research study, what many research studies have shown is that religions like Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses, kind of these more recent religions that came out of the 19th century, give a socioeconomic hope to countries that have not emerged economically yet. So the Mormon Church
Absolutely.
saw, same thing. Yeah. So the Mormon Church saw a huge growth in South America, back in the 90s, and because those countries were not, we hadn't implemented the North American free trade agreement, or the other free trade agreements that really improved their economies. But as soon as those economies became emerging economies, the numbers went flat.
Yeah.
And I happen in my job, I happen to be working with Morocco and some other North African countries. They're definitely like moving into the emerging economy category, and so you'll see, according to research, you'll see an uptick of kind of religious growth, and then, but what we've seen historically is it will flatten. So it's kind of like it's not real sustainable growth.
It's not sustainable at all. I mean, the situation you just described is exactly the same with Jehovah's Witnesses. The only place where they are experiencing growth is South America and Africa, with the exception of a few West African countries that are actually in decline. But Africa as a whole and South America, that's the only places where they are actually experiencing growth.
Thank you for saying that, because I want to confirm this. This is kind of anecdotal, but it confirms the research. So those Mormon friends of mine that are watching or listening, and I think sometimes we think, oh, this great growth in Africa must mean this is the true church and only true church, or it's Jesus is coming, but what we're hearing from research and hear from our friend Riley, that's true for all religions that are in those areas. So Jehovah's Witnesses experiencing the same thing, and it's more about socioeconomic disparities than it is about the truth claims of a religion.
Exactly. Absolutely. Also, internet access is playing a big part in the decline of the religion as well. In in most places where internet access is becoming more ubiquitous, those countries are in decline.
So the other thing that the research studies have shown is that where we're really seeing these massive declines with what one thing the study showed is that once somebody decides to leave, especially if they leave and they decide they're not going to believe in anything supernatural, so they're agnostic, atheist, or some kind of none, they just kind of abandon the supernatural. They never come back. It's done, right? And we're seeing that with millennials and Generation Z. Is that true? Are you seeing that anecdotally in your world?
Oh, absolutely. People are leaving the religion at a younger and younger age. And I personally, I put that down to, again, being able to access the internet. When I was growing up, I mean, I didn't grow up with the internet. If you wanted to research something, you had to go to the library, but now, I mean, you literally have the entire repository of human knowledge in your pocket in the form of a smartphone. And younger people are so savvy at, finding things out. And this religion was just not built for the information age. It just wasn't.
I agree.
It's meant for a time where knowledge could be hidden and hidden very easily. That just isn't the case anymore.
When I was on my mission in Virginia and West Virginia, the Bible Belt, if you're familiar with the United States, the Bible Belt, filled with the evangelical Baptist, religions, and what was interesting about that experience is that I did not realize, growing up in Utah and growing up Mormon, that the evangelical Christians, or just Christianity in general, did not see Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses as Christian, right? That we were cults, and so that was a really interesting kind of eye-opening experience for me, and I would remember being given by lots of people that we would tract into. So tracting for us is knocking on the door, just like you guys do, but we're doing it full time, whereas you guys are doing it just as part of your life, right? It doesn't end after your mission, but I remember knocking on doors, and oftentimes anti-Mormon literature would be given to us, right? And I would take it. It was disturbing. I would take it to my mission president, and he would say, "Oh, that's just anti-Mormon literature. None of it's true." But then I find out later as an adult that it really, maybe it was written disparagingly, but what they were saying about the church was true, and the church just had not like talked about it, openly. And so one of the things that the Mormon Church has done since about 2015 is gone through a big transparency project. So for example, growing up for me, what I was taught is that there were these golden plates, and the golden plates were written on by ancient Americans found in a hillside. Joseph Smith, got these plates, had them in front of him, and had these spectacles called a Urim and Thummim, right? That he could translate this Reformed Egyptian and then wrote it into English. What really happened is that he never ever once translated from golden plates. He always kept this box covered, and he looked into a hat with a stone in the hat, like a seer stone, like a magical stone, and letters and words would come out of the stone in the hat, and he could see it. And then he would describe what he was seeing to Oliver Cowdery, and Oliver Cowdery would write it down. Those are two very different things.
Yeah.
Now they're both
Yeah.
they're both magical, but one feels a little more biblical, and the other feels like folk magic.
Yeah.
Still both supernatural, right? But I think that part of what the church has recognized that the internet is very powerful, and the information that comes through the internet, it really allows you to research stuff that you couldn't research before. So the church, and to their credit, really has made an effort to just tell their history themselves. There's always a little apologetic spin, but at least they're telling the truth about the history of the church. And I'm curious, including the Book of Mormon, not really necessarily being historical, but is that happening at all? And this is again an effort to try to stave some of this tension and with our younger generations. Is anything like that happening? Any efforts the Jehovah's Witness leaders are making?
No.
Go ahead.
No, not at all. It's just gaslighting upon gaslighting upon gaslighting. The embarrassing parts of the organization's history, they don't speak about at all. They act as if it's not there. They even make efforts to retroactively change some of their publications. I mean, I've actually seen that, where they will, they ask congregation elders to destroy publications that are of a certain age. And if those publications are online, they've actually gone back and edited them. So if you,
Wow.
they actually engage in that practice. I mean, there's one example in particular where in a magazine they said that Armageddon will come by the end of the 20th century. If you look on the online version of that publication now, it doesn't say that. It says very soon or words to that effect. But if you have a hard copy of that publication that you haven't destroyed, that it will say by the end of the 20th century. So they do things like that to try and cover their back. Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to kind of ask you about specifically is Armageddon and the predictions of Jesus returning. Yeah. So in the intro, I mentioned that as a missionary, we did talk to Jehovah's Witnesses on occasion, and of course, when a Jehovah's Witness opens the door, they want to witness to us as we're trying to share our message with them. And one time, one of my companions was saying, "I'm so glad we're not like them." Right? They predict when Jesus is coming, and they've always made that. They've always been wrong. And so I'm curious, from your perspective as a Jehovah's Witness, growing up Jehovah's Witness, what was your view of Mormons and Mormonism?
Oh, I always thought that Mormonism was, I probably didn't use the word cult, but I thought that they were very, very strange and not real Christians, just like a strange Christian sect. Pretty much like the way that Mormons think of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
But I do remember having conversations with Mormons who were on their mission, and I always admired them, even though I thought that their beliefs were strange, and I always admired them because the people I saw were always very young, and I admired the fact that they were doing something that they thought was right. They were doing what they thought was a good thing, instead of doing things that, well, in Jehovah's Witnesses, we say the desires incidental to youth, instead of, following a path that most people of their age would typically follow. So I always had a great amount of respect for them for that. But I did think that they were very strange and weird. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One of the experiences we had is a Jehovah's Witness woman who would meet with us in the park because she was single, we were single. Of course, we didn't want anyone to think we were doing anything wrong, so we were very, very open with our conversation. So we're out of the park, she's talking to us about reasoning with the scriptures. We're talking to her about Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon and how do you receive revelation, etc. And I always kind of had this policy of myself as a missionary that because I was in the Bible Belt, the way that I would, try to like bridge any gaps is I would offer that we would go to their church and visit it one time and then reciprocate by coming to our church one time. So that's how I would bridge the gap. I did that with Jerry Falwell in Lynchburg, Virginia. I did it with her. Now she would not come, by the way. So I'll tell the rest of the story. So we went to a Kingdom Hall, and it was interesting because I in that particular Kingdom Hall meeting, almost all of what they were teaching was how to proselyte, and they actually kind of staged, what happens when you're talking to somebody and they have this question, and is that typically what happens in a Kingdom Hall? Because I only went that one time.
Yeah, it sounds like you went to the midweek meeting. So the meeting that they have on the Sunday is a public meeting. That's where you will have a public talk or a sermon. And then afterwards, there'd be a study of, I use that term loosely because it's not really studying, but that's what they call it. A study of a magazine article on a Bible topic. But in the midweek, the meeting is all about teaching you to become a better evangelizer. That's what the whole midweek meeting is about. So it sounds like that's the one that you attended.
And then after we attended, it was really interesting, and I enjoyed it. But I thought she would come to one of our church meetings, and afterwards she said, "Oh no, I'm not going to go to yours." Now, and I wondered, is that a problem for a Jehovah's Witness to attend?
It is strictly forbidden. It is strictly forbidden.
I had no idea.
Yeah. There is absolutely no way that you would ever agree. You would ever get a fully dedicated Jehovah's Witness to agree to come to another religious service. It's just not going to happen.
So would it make sense to you that so I guess in her mind, she would have justified, because I guess she didn't come right out and say, yeah, I'll agree to swapping experience, but she gave us the impression that she'd think about it. And I just wonder, maybe she was thinking, hey, I could get these guys to Kingdom Hall. I'll let them think I'm going to join, come to one of their services. That
would not surprise me. That's highly, not even possible. It's highly likely. It's highly likely that would not surprise me at all.
Because what would that do for her? Because that's a pretty strong motivation, right? Like it's really important to her to get us to Kingdom Hall or to even get us to join. Does that mean something for her salvation, that that she would, I don't know. I'm just wondering how that fits
Yeah.
with kind of the afterlife idea.
So the within the Jehovah's Witness doctrine, and also in the culture as well, there's a very, very strong emphasis on blood guilt. So basically, it comes from a scripture. I can't remember where it is, but it says something like a wicked man will die for his error. But if I say that this wicked man is going to die, and you do not try to warn him and help him to turn away from his wicked ways, he will still die for being wicked, but I will also ask his blood off of your head for the fact that you didn't warn him. So that's the whole motivation behind the Jehovah's Witnesses preaching work. That's one of the strongest motivations. It's blood guilt. Witnesses feel that if they don't preach, they will be guilty for the deaths of all the people that could potentially have converted if they had preached to them.
Yeah.
So it's not just it's a life. They say it's a life-saving work, which according to their ideas, it is a life-saving work. They're trying to save people's lives, but they're also trying to save their own lives.
And saving their life means that they would be resurrected and live in Earth's paradise. Is that accurate to say? Is it a resurrection of the body, or?
No. So witnesses believe that everyone who's after Armageddon, everyone who has ever lived, pretty much, not necessarily every single person, but pretty much most people who have ever lived and died prior to Armageddon will be resurrected into the new world. Witnesses who are alive right now and survive into Armageddon, they will just transition into the new world without ever having to die and be resurrected. So the resurrection applies to people who died prior to Armageddon. Everyone who died at Armageddon now, that's right. Everyone who dies at Armageddon are dead forever. Yeah.
Okay. And so everybody, so not, let's just, this was an example we used all the time in discussing with her, the witness that we talked to in Virginia. We would use the example of Hitler. Okay. So Hitler died. What happens to Hitler but he never had an opportunity to hear the witness's message, but he, committed some serious atrocities, obviously. What happens to him post Armageddon when we have the new world?
You will get different, speaking about Hitler specifically, you'll get different answers from different witnesses depending on who you speak to. But I think the general consensus, which isn't an official consensus from the organization, but the general consensus is that someone like Hitler will not be resurrected because he actively tried to exterminate witnesses when he was in power. So people like Adam and Eve, Hitler, Cain, Judas Iscariot, those are the people that are generally believed to will not be resurrected. But other people who didn't have an opportunity to hear the Jehovah's Witness message, they'll be resurrected.
So you just blew my mind a little bit. I didn't know that about Adam and Eve in that religion. Tell us more about Adam and Eve won't get resurrected.
No, not according to JW doctrine. No, because they were perfect. They didn't sin out of being imperfect. They were perfect, which means that they made a conscious decision to sin. So they would not be getting a resurrection.
So what would happen? What's going to happen to them?
They're just dead forever now.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, in Mormonism, Adam and Eve are exalted beings. They're,
Really?
Yeah. I never made so with Adam and Eve, so in Mormonism, the whole process in the garden was actually meant to happen. Eve, actually, we exalt Eve actually more so than even Adam, because she knew that it was God's plan for us to take the fruit, but he let her choose between hearing Satan's version and God's version, and she chose the right path, which was bringing the sin and death into the world so that we could then have Christ arrive, and then that would bring about restitution and resurrection. But yeah,
Wow.
they are. We see them as exalted beings, and Eve is our great mother, and so yeah, we see them very differently. I didn't know that.
Wow, that's really interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. No,
So
witnesses
yeah,
see Adam
go
and
ahead.
Eve as being like the first rebels. They were like, they were
Yeah.
that was a rebellion, so that they won't be coming back at all.
So I also didn't realize that. So if someone dies for JW doctrine, that someone dies and they're not resurrected, they just stay dead. So
Yeah.
there's not a hell. Does
No,
that mean
Jehovah's
there's not a
Witnesses
hell?
don't believe in. No, they don't believe in hell.
Yeah. So
Jehovah's Witnesses don't
I
believe in
think
hell.
I didn't realize that either. That is really interesting because that's exactly how the Old Testament views death. And,
Yeah.
the Jewish culture, there is no hell. You either
Hmm.
just die and don't get resurrected and you just stay dead, or you get resurrected, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that comes right out of, the Old
Hmm.
Testament.
Hmm.
So I think some of our audience will want to understand a little bit about your situation. So I have an audience that's fairly eclectic. I have family members who grew up in the church, have left the church, and they consider themselves atheists. I have family members who are true believing Mormons, and a whole bunch of people in between. So I have to be conscious of
Sure.
the audience. And I know some people watching might say, well, Riley was accused of adultery, he was kicked out, and so the reason he's an ex-JW and doesn't believe anymore is because his feelings are hurt that they kicked him out, or he's angry or bitter because they falsely accused him. And so I'm curious if you're willing to share what your journey was and where you're at today. Is this an ex-Jehovah's Witness situation for you where you do feel angry about the false accusation, or if you had a full deconstruction of faith
Hmm.
to the point that you realize there is no God, and where are you at in that process, and
That's
how
a
has it
very, very good.
changed?
That's a very good question. So initially, I was very angry. I wasn't angry about being disfellowshipped because, in my mind, I deserved it because I did do the thing that I was disfellowshipped for. Even though I think that my punishment was harsher because of the accusations, I did do the thing that I was disfellowshipped for. So I had no hard feelings about that. I had a lot of hard feelings about a lot of other things, but not about that in particular. And I was angry for a long time. But I continued to believe that it was the one true religion for about a year and a half after that. Even though I wasn't attending meetings, even though I decided that I didn't want to go back, which for me was a death sentence. I was a dead man walking. It's like being on death row where you're going to die. It's just a matter of time. You're just waiting for it to happen. So that's the
Could you have
situation.
tried to go back?
Yeah, I could try to go back now. There's nothing
Okay.
preventing any ex-Jehovah's Witness from going back if they want to go back. The door is always open for them to go back. But I chose not to go back because I was never really happy as a Jehovah's Witness. I was never really happy, and everything that happened, leading up to me being disfellowshipped, I just didn't want that for my life anymore. And I met somebody, started a relationship with her, and the amount getting to know her and falling in love with her started showing cracks in the doctrine, because I was always taught that non-Jehovah's Witnesses, that worldly people as they call them, they're all untrustworthy, wicked. The world is a horrible place. But through meeting her and then meeting her friends and meeting her family and deepening our relationship, I started to see that just wasn't true. I started to see that the stigma that witnesses place on people outside of the religion is very, very undeserved. And that was like one of the first things that made me start to question the beliefs. But I still believed it was the truth. I was upset about some things. I was disillusioned about the whole, lifestyle and everything, excuse me. But I still believed it was the one true religion. And then in 2020, early 2020, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so early 2020, when the coronavirus pandemic broke out, I was absolutely terrified because I was 100% convinced that this was the lead up to Armageddon.
Yes, I see.
I believe that this was the great tribulation that the Bible speaks of, and any minute now it's going to be Armageddon and I'm going to die. I was convinced of it.
Because
I
you're
still didn't,
disfellowshipped, you're
yeah,
out. Yeah.
yeah. I still wasn't going to go back. I'd accepted my fate. When I decided that I would never go back, I knew fully what that meant. I knew that one day soon that would mean my death. But I preferred that than being a Jehovah's Witness.
So let me just pause on that for a second, because
Sure.
when you say you prefer death, I have a question from the audience that I think would be helpful to answer. Do Jehovah's Witnesses believe that the souls will exist after death? So let's say in your situation, it really was Armageddon. You die. You are not going to be resurrected because you were disfellowshipped. Does anything happen to your soul, or is the soul dead?
The soul is dead. Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in immortality of the soul. They believe that the soul is the person. It's not a separate thing.
And by the way, for the audience that has that question, that is the way, and I think Jehovah's Witnesses recognize this in the Bible, that is how the Old Testament and really the Jewish religion sees this. There is not an immortality of the soul. Hell was really invented, post Constantine and really kind of this Christian idea. Yeah.
Exactly.
But that's not originally in the Bible. Jesus didn't even teach about hell. So you, in your mind, Armageddon is here, you're going to die. And when you die, your soul, your body, everything's just over. But what you said, I want you to, if you don't mind, just telling us more. Why would you prefer death and ceasing to exist over going back to the church?
Because, okay, so how it played out was that one night I was awake in bed, as I often was during the early part of 2020, absolutely terrified. I was having nightmares every night of Armageddon and being destroyed. Literally, I mean, any Jehovah's Witness around my age will tell you that they were raised on pictures in the books of fireballs literally raining down on people at Armageddon, and women, children, babies, being crushed by buildings. So those are the images I'm raised with, and that's what I'm anticipating as a result of this coronavirus. So I'm not sleeping. I'm awake every night for hours, and one night I just woke up and my partner was in the bed next to me, still asleep, and I prayed to Jehovah, and I said to him, I know that I'm going to die soon. I know Armageddon is coming and I'm going to die. But you know what? I don't care. I said, this woman in the bed next to me has shown me more love and support than you ever have in my entire time as a Jehovah's Witness. I said, I know that I'm a very flawed person. If I wasn't a flawed person, I wouldn't have been disfellowshipped. So I said, I acknowledge that and I accept responsibility for that. And I acknowledge and give you credit where it's due that you've been patient with me over my flaws. But loving and supportive, you haven't. I've only known this woman for a little over a year, and she's been more supportive and loving to me in that time than you ever have. And for that reason, I will never, ever come back to you. This was me praying to God and telling him this. I said, I will never, ever come back to you. And if that means that I die, then I die. I would rather die, being happy and being loyal to this woman who loves me with all her heart unconditionally than serving you, who only cares about rules and regulations. I said to him, if at the very end, there's the paradise and all the Jehovah's Witnesses on the right and my girlfriend and everlasting destruction on the left, I said, and you offered me the chance, I said, this is your final chance. All you have to do is walk to the right. I would say to you, I'm okay, thank you. And then I would walk over to the left. I would hold my partner tight and just wait for the fireball to hit me. I said all of this to him, and then I said amen, and then went to sleep.
I love what struck me was when you said you'd hold your partner tight.
Yeah.
So she is so this is so profound. Thank you for sharing that, Riley, because I think regardless of your belief system, what's important to recognize is the only thing we actually have is the time that has been given us.
Yeah.
So it really is so important to be present. And
Absolutely.
you just gave perfect, beautiful example. Like that's what matters to you right now is the people in your life who love you and who love you back.
Exactly.
Unconditionally, right?
Absolutely.
That's beautiful.
Absolutely. And I've never had that. That's why it meant so much to me. And that's why it still means so much to me, because I never had that as a Jehovah's Witness from anybody.
Love was always conditional?
Yeah, absolutely. Jehovah's Witnesses don't know what real love is. They don't. And I didn't know what real love was until I was disfellowshipped.
So then so by the way, anybody watching, Armageddon didn't happen.
No, it didn't.
Riley, you're alive. And I want to reach out and give you a hug and say you're alive. Now, where are you at with your belief system?
So I don't believe, I'm an agnostic atheist now. I don't believe in God at all. I'm not against the idea that there could possibly be a superior being that created the earth and everything on it. I'm not opposed to that idea, but even if it was scientifically proven tomorrow that God does exist, that doesn't mean that he deserves or is entitled to our worship. That's where I'm at now. Just by virtue of being the creator, that doesn't necessarily equal God to me. But for all intents and purposes, I'm a 100% non-believer now.
And as an agnostic atheist, or however you define that, which everybody kind of does that differently, do you find that it is easier to live in the present and make the most of what you have?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, one thing that I'm always hearing from people who do believe, and I have no problem with believers, at all. I have no problem with religion itself, really. One thing that I'm always hearing from believers is that, well, without God, how do you have a purpose in life? And I think it's actually easier to have a purpose in life without that hope of a life after this one, because it's more incumbent on you to make the most of what you have now, because that is all that there is.
I have one of my favorite atheists is my niece, Brittany. And, hopefully she'll watch, or she's watching. But one of the things that I've learned about her journey, going from being Mormon to atheist, really, or agnostic, whatever, is what she has said to me is you have to be more accountable for your purpose in life, because you have to figure out what it is and decide how to live it.
Exactly.
Somebody else isn't telling you, the religion's not telling you. You really end up being, that was what she would say, is you end up having to be more accountable.
Well, your niece put it a lot more eloquently than I ever could. So she's absolutely right. I 100% agree, 100%. But I wasn't looking for the religion to be false. When I, as we say in the XGW community, woke up, I wasn't looking to wake up. It happened completely by accident. I was on the bus scrolling through Facebook, and Facebook showed me a memory of a post that I posted a few years prior. And somebody commented on that, and I realized that I hadn't spoken to that person in a long time. So I clicked on their profile, and I noticed that we weren't actually friends on Facebook anymore. So she must have unfriended me at some point. And her profile picture was of a T-shirt that had the word apostate on it in big bold letters. And I had a very visceral reaction to that, because, in the Jehovah's Witness religion, an apostate is like the closest you can get to being a demon. It's like in the hierarchy of evil, it's like the devil, demons, and then apostates. And, you know, we're literally programmed to have a very visceral reaction to anything apostate. So when I saw that, I was immediately terrified. But then I saw that she had all of this anti-JW stuff on her profile, all of these like pictures and memes and things. So I immediately, I clicked off straight away, but it stayed in my mind. And over the next couple of weeks, it just kept on coming back to my mind. I was like, why would anyone self-identify as an apostate when an apostate is such an evil thing? I couldn't understand why someone would call themselves an apostate, you know, because Jehovah's Witnesses don't go by the dictionary definition of that word. They go by the cultural definition of that word, which is absolutely repugnant. So I went back on her profile again and started looking at some of the things that she was saying. And then that just sent me down a rabbit hole. And then I started researching the religion for the very first time in my life. I researched the religion using non-approved sources. So I started watching videos on YouTube. Excuse me. Excuse me. Started watching videos on YouTube, and within a week, I completely dismantled the religion in my own mind. Within a week. All it took was 1 week.
This is before meeting your now.
No, this was after. This was after meeting her.
Okay. So she brought into your world the reality that there is more to life than Jehovah's Witness, or than. Do you mind sharing her name? Is it, or would she not want that? Just to get.
Oh no, sure, no problem. Her name's Marsha.
Marsha, because all right, thank you, Marsha. So
we're actually getting married in December.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What kind of ceremony will you have?
We're going to have a non-religious civil ceremony, but there are going to be some traditions in there that we both like that possibly have some kind of religious significance to some people, but to us, we're just including them because we like them. So, yeah.
I just performed a wedding last night in my backyard as a
Oh wow! Oh, that is so cool.
That's why I was a little late getting back to you, because it's in the morning here in Utah. It's in the afternoon there where you're at in the UK. But I had a hard time getting going this morning. But I married my cousin's daughter and her husband. So
that's lovely.
So I can marry you and Marsha if you want. I'll voluntarily, I'll pay my own expenses just to meet you. But,
we would have loved that, but we have someone. So yeah.
So as you kind of think, so I want to kind of do in this next section how much time do you have, by the way, I should ask?
Oh no, I'm good for time.
Okay, good. I'd like to kind of go into a section of the comparing, contrasting.
Sure.
I know that I know that just with my Mormon brain, I know in my, and I probably just, when I think about apostates or believers or whatever, when you say like she mentioned she called herself an apostate, I think I would call myself a heretic.
Right.
Where I want to do reformation, but
right.
So, but I still, because I've grown up in the church and in the culture, I'll always have, no matter what, a Mormon brain. It's just, I know how, we think and process information, especially related to Jehovah's Witnesses. So one of the things that I know just, or that many of the Mormon buttercups that are participating in the show are thinking is I'm glad that we're Mormon because we're more progressive. So some of my progressive Mormon friends would say, well, at least we're more progressive than Jehovah's Witnesses, right? So we are willing. So and we're gonna double click on these ideas to see if they're really true, because I know that some would think, oh well, we're softer. We do not, we don't shun. We really don't. There's still for anyone leaving a religion, there's still a cultural challenge, and it still feels like a crisis. But our families don't shun us. That's true. You might see it but it's not church enforced, it's family enforced.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
but for those progressive Mormons who might be thinking that, would you say that's true, that Mormonism is somehow more progressive than Jehovah's Witnesses?
Oh, absolutely. I think I would definitely say that Jehovah's Witnesses, out of the Christian denominations that I'm aware of, I would definitely say that Jehovah's Witnesses are the least progressive. In terms of religion in general, I'd say that the only religion I can think of that is even less progressive than Jehovah's Witnesses will be like the radical fundamental Islamists.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
Jehovah's Witnesses fall into that league.
And as far as another question that will come up is the 144,000. So in Mormonism, and Mormonism, I think, somewhat understood the biblical context of hell, but not fully. Because when talking with Jehovah's Witnesses that I've talked to in the past, they do have an understanding of the Bible. They understand the
Mm,
Bible pretty well, better than Mormons, because there has been a lot of research in early Jehovah's Witness. Well, it was not called Jehovah's Witness, but Watchtower
yeah.
or those things from the past. Did look at some original Hebrew texts and, for example, understand hell biblically better than we do. So in Mormonism, though, there is a lot of progression. So you can die and have lived a terrible life, but you will have an opportunity in the spirit world prior to the resurrection to accept the message of Jesus according to Mormon doctrine, and potentially and get exalted to some degree of glory. So we have these kingdoms of heaven, and even the lowest of these kingdoms of heaven are still a kingdom of glory where you're better off than we are now, right? So there's a lot of mercy. Mormonism, in terms of the grand scheme of the heavens, a lot of mercy, right? For everyone. Those who know, like beyond the shadow of a doubt, that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the only true church, and they fully apostatize and fight against the church, they're at risk of going to outer darkness with Satan and his angels. So there is an element of hell in Mormonism, but the highest level. So the highest level in Mormonism of the kingdoms of glory is the celestial kingdom. And the celestial kingdom is where you can remain married, and Mormon doctrine would say you then become exalted as the gods, and you become gods. Now, I don't think that we're saying that right now. I think Russell and Nelson might have been asked if that's true, and I think maybe it was that we're going to rule over our own planets. I think we've maybe said
Mm.
we're not sure about that, but my point in that is that for Mormons, the celestial kingdom is actually the earth. So earth will be renewed post-millennium into a paradisical, or into a glorified sphere of glass and fire and glory. And that's where the celestial kingdom will be, and the highest, the gods will be, if you're in that category, will be on earth. For the Jehovah's Witnesses, the earth is the paradisical glory for those who are resurrected and accepted Jehovah. But the 144,000, what maybe teach us about who they are and where
Sure.
do they reside?
So Jehovah's Witnesses believe that the 144,000 will rule with Jesus in heaven. So they're going to serve as kings and priests. And they will basically form the cabinet of a government with Jesus as the president, and the earth will be their subjects. That's to put it into more understandable terms.
Where is heaven when you say they'll rule with Jesus in heaven? And if earth is the paradisical glory where we're living, if we've accepted Jehovah, we're resurrected, where's heaven?
Heaven is up in the sky somewhere. I mean, witness doctrine isn't very specific about where heaven is physically located. but it's just, the heavens just above the earth. It's very, very general and vague.
And Jesus calls this 144,000 himself.
That's right. Yeah.
And by the way, for Mormon audience members, Jesus is not Jehovah for Jehovah's
No,
Witnesses.
no, very different for Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah.
Tell us about
So
that.
basically, Jehovah is the Father and Jesus is the Son. They believe that Jesus is the firstborn of all creation. So Jesus was the very first thing that Jehovah God created. And everything else that was created after that was created with Jesus's help. So Jesus had a hand in creating everything.
So Jehovah's Witnesses do believe that Jesus Christ and the Father are separate people.
Yes, separate people.
But that the Father's name is Jehovah.
Yes.
And Jesus is not Jehovah. So in Mormonism, Jesus is Jehovah, and Jesus is separate from God the Father. But God the Father's name in Mormonism is Elohim, coming from the Bible, where
the Old Testament,
Eloi, the Old Testament, the Elohim, or however you say that word, created heaven and earth. And so, but just for the audience, I wanted everyone to know that Jehovah is Father God, and His Son is Jesus. Right? And so does it Jehovah that chooses the 144,000 or Jesus?
It's Jesus. I might not be 100% accurate. I might not be accurate on that, but from what I remember, it is Jesus that chooses 144,000. He anoints them with Holy Spirit, and they become born again, and then they have this deep feeling that is like they're 100% sure that they have been chosen. And
so I have a question about that that maybe you could answer. A woman told me that she was one of the 144,000. So how do you know if you're one of them before the resurrection? So you could know now if you're one of the 144,000, right?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even fully understand it when I was a witness. It was one of I think in Mormonism you call them shelf items.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was one of my shelf items. Ever since I was a small boy, how do the anointed ones know that they are anointed? And the question was never answered to me to my satisfaction. But the standard answer is that their spirit bears witness with God's spirit to know that they've been chosen, and that's basically it. They just know that they are, and we're taught very, very strongly that we shouldn't question. When someone says that they are one of the anointed, we shouldn't question or doubt them. We should just take their word for it.
Well, I think I have felt the Spirit tell me that you're one of the 144,000, Riley. So maybe.
Yeah.
And if it's true, then remember me.
When I get into my kingdom.
Remember that Mormon.
Yeah.
So the other question I wanted to ask you, and this is something I experienced as a Mormon missionary, and I've also seen this in religious research, quantifiable research, and so I want to ask you this question, and it's about race and how our religions differ in racial demographic makeup. So one of the things, again, growing up in Utah and as a Mormon, you're surrounded by Mormons, you're surrounded by people who are like you, and you're surrounded by your ancestry, right? So most of us came from Europe, Scandinavia. So everybody's white, blonde hair, blue eyed, right? And so when I went on my mission, and this is how naive I was, this will surprise some people. I remember knocking on the door, and a woman answered the door and said, "I don't know how you can. I would never join your church. You're racists." And I was like, "I'm not a racist," and I really didn't think that I was. I mean, I've always had a fairly like open mind, and I just never thought that of myself as racist. And I turned to my companion afterwards and, oh no, I asked her, I'm like, why do you think that? That's just not true at all. And she's like, well, you guys didn't let blacks in the church, African Americans in the church until 1978. I did not know that because I'm
Wow.
not, I
Yeah,
didn't know that.
it was
And
before your time.
what really happened, was the church did not black African Americans or people from African descent could be baptized, but they could not be part of the priesthood or get married in the temple. Now, why is that an important distinction? Because if you're married in the temple, remember how I said there are these degrees of
Mm.
glory. So the telestial kingdom is the lowest kingdom of glory. You can get to that kingdom by just accepting Jesus and getting baptized, even if you do that posthumously, even if you do that after you've died. That's why we do baptisms for the dead, because if you
Mm.
accept it in the spirit world, we'll do the baptism for you, and then you get to have a kingdom of glory. But to get to the highest kingdom and to become gods, you need to be married in the temple, and you become a god and goddess, priest and priestess together. And so that's a pretty serious thing to say, that everyone from African descent cannot get married in the temple. So they can make it to the telestial, maybe
And
the
no higher.
terrestrial, but
Mm.
no higher. They can't get to the celestial. And what's probably many of my Mormon family and friends who are audience members may not know this, and it will not feel good. What we also believed is the reason we set it up that way is so that those in the terrestrial and telestial kingdom become ministering angels, and they're ministering to those in the celestial kingdom. So
servants,
what
basically.
they're servants.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that.
Mm.
I knew that those in the telestial and terrestrial kingdom were ministering angels to those in the celestial kingdom, but I realized what was really happening is they're servants to the
Yeah.
white gods, right? So it's white supremacy for sure, right? And
Yeah.
I found that to be so disturbing. One of those things that I started early in my life in the church had to put on the shelf, because in my mind I'm like, well, that was 1978, right? So that ended, and it did. So now for those paying attention or audience members, now all people of all races can make it to the celestial kingdom. There's not this servant thing anymore. That changed in 1978. But what happened in reality is this policy or doctrine of literally segregation.
Mm.
Our church was pro-segregation, and fought the civil rights movement right up until 1978. Then it changed, and it was decreed that we don't believe in that anymore. But we didn't do anything to unwind
Yeah.
what we taught forever, right? And it wasn't until 2015 that we actually came out with church policy and doctrine that's disavowed any of those previous ideas. We said we were wrong. We were racist. Brigham Young was racist, and we made a mistake. And now we didn't say we're sorry. We don't apologize,
Mm.
but we did say that we were wrong in what we were saying. We don't believe it, and we never did. We disavow any of those ideas. But because of this, we have a very, very homogeneous population in Mormonism
Mm.
of white people. And I remember on my mission seeing many of the Jehovah's Witnesses that I met. Now, this is partly because I was in the South, were African American. And I noticed that there was, and then in the research that I've studied, Jehovah's Witnesses have a far larger African American demographic than Mormons do. And many Mormons that are watching may not realize that Jehovah's Witnesses seem to have a better appeal. Now, I'm not saying that Jehovah's Witnesses had never had a racist past, but there seems to be a better appeal to other races, especially African Americans, than Mormons do. Mormons do not have the same proportionate number of African Americans as Jehovah's Witnesses. statistically. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, what were there race kind of dynamics that happen in Jehovah's Witnesses? Did they ever recognize what Mormons were doing and that was wrong, or was that ever even an issue?
Um, okay, it's not an easy question to answer. Growing up, I can honestly say that I didn't experience any overt racism being a Jehovah's Witness within the organization. I'd heard of anecdotal, experiences from people which I kind of just dismissed as being, human imperfection, which is the go-to line for a lot of things that happen, in the organization that are wrong. But I never saw any evidence of there being a systemic problem in the organization where race was concerned. I feel differently now, but still, I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses is an extremely ethnically diverse religion. I mean, I've looked at some of the Pew Research data on this, and I think Jehovah's Witnesses, out of the Protestant denominations, are probably the most ethnically diverse out of all of them, and I definitely saw that. I definitely saw that in my time. Yeah. Where I feel differently now is, I mean, I know a lot now about the organization's past that I didn't know while I was a member. Some of the racist things of the past. And it's good that those things aren't practiced or taught now. I'm not knocking them for that, but these are things that were hidden from me, Also, there's a lot of, when it comes to the publications, the illustrations in the publications are not as diverse as, the membership is. I mean, when it comes to photographs of like modern day photographs of Jehovah's Witnesses, yeah, there's a lot of ethnic diversity. When it comes to the portrayal of biblical characters, not so much. Everyone is white in Jehovah's Witnesses literature from Bible times, which is just ridiculous. I'm sure you know that yourself. Also, when it comes to cultural things, I view Jehovah's Witnesses as a cult, and one dominant feature of many cults is that they try to overwrite people's personalities with a cult persona. And this is very, very true of Jehovah's Witnesses as well. And it goes so far as to even erase somebody's cultural identity.
Yes. Yep.
And that's something that I personally feel particularly aggrieved about, because I don't really have a strong connection to my cultural heritage as a result of being a Jehovah's Witness. That's something that I've only come to identify recently, and something that I'm actively trying to change. But I think I would have a much stronger connection to my cultural heritage if I were never a witness than I currently do. When it comes to, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Jehovah's Witnesses have an annual convention. It's a bit like the conferences that Mormons have.
Yes.
Yeah. And the organization is very, very proud of all of the different ethnic and cultural standards of dressing that the attendees have, and they put them on the magazines. And you open any Jehovah's Witness magazine that has an image of the convention, you'll see people there with all the different traditional dresses from their various parts of the world, and the organization is very, very proud of that, and they're very they're very, very keen and eager to have that displayed.
Highlight
but
that.
But when it comes to the practice of one's own culture, that's where they draw the line. When it comes to certain cultural practices, they're not so keen on that. They're keen for you to look. They're keen to see visual evidence of diversity in culture. But when it comes to practicing your culture, then it's a different story.
I've noticed that to a degree in Mormonism. There's a lot of excitement to accept the cultural diversity of other cultures, but it's really at a superficial level. It's let's have a hukilau for activity for the Hawaiians, and maybe learn a little bit about songs and dress from the African culture or from the Indian culture.
Yeah.
But there's a propensity for sure to, in the doctrine and in the way that we worship, to adopt Jesus's culture, or there's and I assume the same thing with Jehovah's Witnesses. It's
Yeah.
Jehovah's culture, right?
Yeah. I mean, when I was a teenager, me and my brother and our friends, like we had like a good group of like guys, young black guys in the congregation I grew up in, and we were constantly being counseled or told off, reprimanded about our hairstyles all the time. And our hairstyles weren't anything outlandish, just like a fade or something like that back when I had hair. many moons ago. But we were constantly being reprimanded about our hairstyles. It was just like, anything that didn't fit the traditional conservative white look was frowned upon. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I do know what you mean. So one thing I'm just going to call out to my Mormon friends and family who have a tendency, just like I have in the past, to think, oh, I'm so glad I'm a Mormon and not a Jehovah's Witness, because Mormons are more progressive and better in X, Y, and Z areas. Well, I'm going to shatter that a little bit to say Jehovah's Witnesses have blown Mormonism out of the water when it comes to cultural diversity. It is a much more culturally, racially, ethnically diverse organization than Mormonism, for sure. In fact, the Pew research that you're referring to, I'm glad we've been looking at research to kind of discuss it, shows that the Mormon church is so white that demographically it fits with, we fit with the white evangelical Protestant religion, whereas Jehovah's Witnesses are so diverse that they are not categorized demographically with white Protestants. They're literally considered in the Pew Research non-white Protestant for Jehovah's Witnesses. So that's a strength for Jehovah's Witnesses. Do you have a sense as to why that it is such a culturally diverse religion? Any ideas?
I think it's because
or ethnically diverse.
Yeah, I think it's because I think more so than many other Christian denominations, Jehovah's Witnesses are biblical literalists in the truest sense. So scriptures like, I can't remember where it is. I can never remember where scriptures are. I remember what they say word for word, but I can never remember where they are. So there's a scripture that says, God is not partial. That was with, I think it was Cornelius. I think that was when one of the apostles met Cornelius, who was a Roman, and then he had a dream about all of this so-called unclean food. And then that dream represented that, God doesn't care whether you're a Jew or a Gentile. Jehovah's Witnesses take that. I think it was Peter. Yeah. Jehovah's Witnesses take that scripture very, very seriously, very, very seriously. So I think it's the biblical literalism that lends itself to being more open to people from other cultures. I mean, the official website of the Jehovah's Witnesses, jw.org, is the most translated website in the world. It's translated in excess of 700 languages.
So in just the research that I've done, I completely agree. And that has been true for the Jehovah's Witness religion since the beginning, since the 19th century, even amongst, a very racially tense time in the Civil War. Jehovah's Witness theology has been what you just described. And it's not, whereas in Mormonism, there was an initial openness to all races being in the church. Under Joseph Smith, Brigham Young instituted segregation, specifically with African Americans. Sorry. And so if you think about it, like Mormonism stopped with ethnic diversity in the 19th century, whereas Jehovah's Witnesses just had a head start for literally a century on ethnic diversity. So that's if we're trying to be mutually respectful of these two religions, there are strengths in both.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And there are problems in both.
Yeah.
So speaking of problems, I have a question about women in the Jehovah's Witness religion. So there are some nuances and differences between the two religions with regard to women. We know that Paul in the Bible, when we think about Christianity, was clear that women had a subservient role to men. That they could not speak in church. They shouldn't have, leadership positions. You mentioned that the 144,000 who will be Jesus's leadership team, his cabinet in the millennium, they are all men, correct?
No, they're men and women.
Oh, they're men and women. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So describe that.
Yeah.
Are there differences in leadership? I mean, women can have the same leadership positions as men?
No, not in the congregations, but
Okay.
women can be anointed and be part of the 144,000 because witnesses believe that once they are taken up to heaven and they take their positions as kings and priests, they will essentially be genderless. So it doesn't matter if they were a woman when they were in their human body on earth, because once they get to heaven, they're going to be neither male nor female in the strictest sense. So women do form part of the 144,000. But in terms of the leadership at a local congregational level, there are no positions available to women. Everything is done by men.
So they do, and that is because of Paul, I assume.
I'd say that Paul's teachings do have a huge impact on it, but I just think that the way Jehovah's Witnesses understand the Bible in general as a whole is that women are to be subordinate to men. There's scriptures that say Adam was created first, so therefore he's supposed to be over Eve, and therefore men are supposed to be over women.
Are there any efforts within the congregation to change that? And
none, no whatsoever. It will never ever happen.
That would be intolerant, right? That'd be apostasy.
Yeah.
So, interestingly enough, I'm going to tell you that some of our Mormon audience members will be surprised to hear that the 144,000 would be genderless. And I think that what's important to recognize for those Mormons that are joining us, gender is unique in Mormonism. Mormonism has extended gender both pre-mortally and post-mortally, right? So gender has been something we were before we came to this earth, and gender is part of who we are after. And that is rare. That I don't know many religions that, especially Christian religions, that think that way. Gender's not part of heaven in most religions. It's like you said, especially if you're one of the 144,000, you're omnipotent in a way. Mm-hmm. You're an angel, so gender's you transcend. You're above gender, right?
Yeah. So gender is something that's purely physical. It's an aspect of your physical body, and spirit beings don't have physical bodies, so therefore they don't have genders.
Yeah, and in Mormonism there is kind of there's a you can kind of push a social issue if you do it in a way that is more private and behind the scenes, and not be labeled an apostate. So there is a possibility for kind of social movement within the church, and I know that's been true for women. Women still cannot hold the priesthood, but women do become exalted in the highest level of glory with co-equally with their husbands, as husband and wife, king and queen. In our temple ceremonies, they do become anointed as priestesses. So I think there's probably a little more progressiveness when it comes to women in the Mormon church than with Jehovah's Witnesses. But I want to be clear, it's not it is certainly not equal. We have an egalitarian issue for sure in
No,
Mormonism.
definitely not equal.
Right. And then the other question I know that audience members have is so in terms of social issues, the Mormon Church has doubled down as usual on the queer community. And a lot of that is so much about the doctrine, right? Like I just said, gender is not seen as a necessary evil of the human condition, which I think is how most Christian religions think about it. Jehovah's Witnesses, anyway. Mormons really kind of exalt gender. Gender is, part of God is a man, an exalted man with a body, with man body parts,
Really?
male anatomy.
Wow.
And he has a companion, a wife who is an exalted woman, who is a goddess with female body parts, female anatomy. So gender is it's part of our exaltation doctrine.
Right.
And so you can see why, the queer community it just clashes and so much with Mormonism. What about with Jehovah's Witnesses?
Oh, Jehovah's Witnesses are extremely homophobic. Extremely homophobic. Although they probably wouldn't see themselves that way, because there's this thing of, the old thing, hate the sin, love the sinner. That's the predominant view when it comes to homosexuality within the Jehovah's Witnesses. But yeah, there's absolutely no room whatsoever for homosexuality in the religion. Although if they do acknowledge that people have homosexual feelings that they can't overcome, they acknowledge that can be the case. They don't necessarily say pray the gay away or anything like that. They do think that prayer and relying on Jehovah will help you to deal with those feelings, but they do accept that this is, in some people, this is something that will be there, until the new system, when they become perfect.
It's their cross to bear.
It's their cross to bear, exactly. Yeah. But they have to remain celibate. Yep. They absolutely have to remain celibate if they are that
unless
way.
They get married to a woman and make it work.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same thing in Mormonism. Yeah. So as we kind of wrap up, I wanted to plug your TikTok and give you an opportunity to talk about your TikTok and what you're hoping to accomplish with your TikTok.
Thank you. So TikTok, I'm a lot more open on a personal level on TikTok than I am at my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel I've had for just over a year now, but it's very different from my TikTok. On TikTok, it's a lot more personal, and I'm a lot more open there. But I just basically want to share my experiences, things that I've been through, things that I'm currently going through, how I'm trying to adapt to this new realization of the world, without the Jehovah's Witness lens, and just basically how I'm assimilating into normal everyday life.
So in many ways, it's therapeutic to you, do you feel?
Yes, extremely therapeutic to me. Yeah, very, very much so.
So as we thank you for joining today with Topic Discuss, I so appreciate your time. I wanted to pause to ask to find out if you had any questions that you wanted to ask.
Thank you very much, first of all, for having me on your channel. I'm very honored. I really appreciate it. In terms of questions, I still find the whole different levels of heaven thing very, very confusing. It's not something that I was aware of before, speaking to a lot of ex-Mormons recently. And I think that's something that's very different to most Christian religions, because from what I'm aware of most Christian religions, there's just heaven, earth, and hell, maybe purgatory, but that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that comes from Corinthians. So Paul's teachings to the Corinthians, if you recall, he's talking about resurrection, right? And in this debate amongst the Jews that he's teaching about whether there even is a resurrection, and if you are resurrected, are you resurrected to glory, or are you resurrected to death, like not resurrected at all? So it's really this question about, am I resurrected to live with Jesus, or do I just stay dead? And that's what he's talking about, right? But in that scripture, he talks about there are in the resurrection, he's making a comparison to, there are celestial bodies like the stars and the sun. There are terrestrial bodies, and then he said, just like that, our bodies will be resurrected to corruption or to incorruption. So Joseph Smith, along with Oliver Cowdery, when they were, so this has nothing to do with the Book of Mormon. None of this was ever in the Book of Mormon. But when Joseph Smith was translating or trying to bring forward the true interpretation of the Bible, this is post Book of Mormon, and they were reading Corinthians. They had this question: what does that mean? What's a celestial body? What's a terrestrial body? And so through them praying to God for an answer, they received the answer that those must be kingdoms of glory, and also that they recognize that much of the teachings you'll see throughout New Testament teachings, that if you accept Jesus, and many born again Christians believe this. If you've accepted Jesus, there's nothing else you need to do. You're saved, you're resurrected, and you're in Jesus's presence. And that, I think, was hard for Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery to kind of get their minds around. They liked the idea that God is that merciful, that you just have to do that one thing and all is good. But how are people punished without going to hell? So it's kind of a compromise. It's like,
right.
we want everybody's going to get glorified. Everybody's going to, receive. So God's super merciful. Very few people are going to go to hell, if at all. But it's not fair, right? It's not fair for me to go to the same heaven that Hitler goes to if Hitler accepts Jesus, right?
Even I see.
Yeah. So if Hitler does, let's say Hitler is in the purgatory, which for us is spirit prison, and spirit Mormon missionaries go to his house in spirit world and says, hey, here's the Book of Mormon. He accepts it. He accepts Jesus. Then what happens to him? And he can go to the telestial kingdom, the lowest level,
right,
and be a servant, but still not in hell.
Right.
But it just comes from Corinthians.
Right. I see. Thanks for explaining that.
Which I know for people who are biblical scholars, they'll think that that's ridiculous, because that is not at all what Paul was saying. But
yeah,
that is where it came from.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I find Mormon theology absolutely fascinating. I ask a lot of questions about it on TikTok.
Well, I'm happy to be your Mormon. I'll be your Mormon guest, whatever. I like to talk to. So I'll stitch with you. I'll duet with you, or just answer questions. But yeah, I've spent a lot of my life really in a lot of Mormon research, Mormon apologetics. And so I can talk about, and Mormon history, so I can help with whatever questions people have or that you have. Great, and I will not, and I'll give it to you objectively. It'll be just because I recognize that it's, not, I mean, I just want to talk objectively about it, right? Like, I don't want to whitewash it or apologize for it. I just, here's the truth. Here's what happened. You guys decide. You guys be the judge, right?
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I'm gonna so let's keep our relationship going.
Absolutely.
Let's decide to be we're friends. We're gonna be friends. And
Absolutely.
I have merch that I'm gonna show you here.
Oh, cool.
So my favorite people that I interview that I really enjoy interviewing, I send them a cup and a topic discuss cup. So I would like to send you one of these. If you're willing to, you'd have to give me your address. I don't know if you want to do that, but
Oh,
anyway,
definitely. Thank
I
you so
have,
much. I really appreciate that.
and then you can, have a little bit of merch. But I also show that just to let the audience know that they are welcome to go to my merch and get merch for themselves. And for those of you who are joining late, I see welcome, but we're about to end. But you can watch this. It's going to be on YouTube post live. I want to give Riley you. I'm very impressed with you. I feel for you, care about you, and I really appreciate taking time with me today. I look forward to a friendship with you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Okay. So peace out, buttercups.
Take care. Thank you.